What's up, everyone? We are going through the whole story series, basically just looking through the Bible and seeing how it's a complete story that's focused on Jesus. And so last time we met, Scott talked through how the Israelites were held in captivity. And for years, they'd been waiting for God to bring them out of there. And God had promised that he would be faithful and he would bring them back home. But not only that, that even though the Israelites were unfaithful to him, that he would change their hearts. He would give them a new way to live, that they would be faithful to him as well. And so we see after hundreds of years, eventually the Israelites do make it back home. But the thing is, even though they make it back home, they're still under a captivity, not from Babylon anymore, but after hundreds of years, they are under Roman rule. And so even though they're home, things feel like they're not much different. People are still divided, the people are still unfaithful, and the people are waiting for God to show up. They're waiting for God to free them and for God to be with them. And not only that, but one Israelite in particular is waiting for that promise to come true, for a Messiah to come, but he's also waiting for him and his wife to have a child. And it says they're well advanced in their years and they're old. And so we see a lot of waiting happening in the story that we're going to see today. So I don't know about you, but there's nothing more disappointing than not getting what you've been waiting for. Right? There's nothing more disappointing than waiting for something and not happening. I just think about how every year we go to Disneyland with student ministries. And, there's nothing more magical than being in Disneyland, going on the rides, eating the food, seeing all the attractions and shows. But one thing they don't advertise at Disneyland is how much waiting you have to do. Whether it's waiting in LA traffic, whether it's waiting to go on a ride for like 2 hours in line, or waiting in line for food or even the bathroom, or the worst is when you're waiting for your friends or slow family members that are just taking their sweet time. There's lots of waiting at Disneyland. And I just remember last year when we were waiting in line for the ride Space Mountain. And it said it was going to be like a 2.5 hour wait, and we make it through an hour in line, and all of a sudden on the intercom speaker they say, the ride is closed. It's no longer working. We felt so let down, right? We'd been waiting for an hour and we're just like, man, that sucks. But the thing is, some disappointments and some letdowns, they're frustrating, but we can get over them really fast. Like we were like, oh, we'll just go on a different ride. Or when you're waiting for an Amazon package and it's delayed a couple days, it's frustrating, but you can wait a little longer. But there are some times when we have to wait and we get disappointed by that waiting, that it just feels like the biggest letdown. It just feels so devastating when what we've been waiting for doesn't happen, doesn't come true. I just think about today we were supposed to be at Hume Lake, and summer camp is one of the biggest events that we do, and this year it's not happening. Even though it's virtual, it just feels like that's a huge letdown. Maybe you guys have felt like you've been waiting to hang out with friends and have an amazing summer, and the virus is still going on. And so we've been waiting and being sheltering in place, and we just feel like, man, when will this end? And so for many of us, waiting can lead to a sense of being devastated and feel like, man, what's the point of waiting for something and being hopeful? What's the point of even caring? And eventually, this type of waiting and this type of disappointment can even lead up in our relationship with God, right? When we pray for something and we've been praying for a long time and it seems like God's not answering. Or when we've been seeing the pandemic and seeing what it's done to businesses and to people's lives, we're like, God, what are you doing? Why aren't you ending this virus? Why are you still letting this go on? Or when you read the news about the social injustice and you look at history and you see like, God, why has this been going on for so long? Why aren't you doing anything? And so for us and for the people of Israel, there was lots of waiting, but there was also a lot of disappointments with that waiting as well. But the cool thing that we get to see is that even though there's lots of disappointments, even though there's lots of disappointments when we're waiting, that God will provide in unexpected ways. As you read in Luke chapter 1, this amazing story about how God provides in unexpected ways, we see that angel appears to Zechariah. Remember, Zechariah has been waiting for this Messiah to come. He's been waiting to have a son. And this angel announces this amazing news. He says, Zechariah, you're going to have a son. You and your wife are going to have this unexpected child. And not only that, but this child you're going to have, he's going to prepare a way for the Messiah. He's going to get to tell the people of Israel the good news that God is on his way, that God is going to come to his people and he's going to be with them. And so we would expect Zechariah, who's been waiting for so many years, to be super excited, right? To be overjoyed and just completely just stoked for what's going on. But Zechariah's response is in verse 18 of Luke 1. He says, how can I be sure of this? Basically saying, I've been waiting a long time. How will I know this is going to happen? I've been let down before. How can I be sure of this? You know, for many of us, it feels like we've been waiting and we're like, man, how can I be sure what I've been waiting for is actually going to happen? And it feels like I don't want to be disappointed anymore, so I don't even want to care. And so when Zechariah says these words, how can I be sure of this? Many of us feel that way too towards God. How can I be sure you're going to follow through with what you say, God? But the amazing thing that we see through the rest of his story is that God will provide for our waiting in unexpected ways. That we can have hope while we're waiting, even if we face disappointments or letdowns, because God will provide in unexpected ways. And eventually, as you read through the story in Luke 1, Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth eventually have a son by a crazy miracle. And then Zechariah, after his son is born, he writes and sings this amazing song about how God has provided him a son in an unexpected way and how his son gets to tell this great news about God coming to earth eventually. And it says this in Luke 1, verse 76. It's Zechariah saying, you, my child, will be called a prophet of the Most High, and you will go on before the Lord to prepare the way for him, to give his people the knowledge of salvation through the forgiveness of their sins because of the tender mercy of our God. So even though we may be let down, even though we may be disappointed in our waiting, God will provide in unexpected ways. Just like he did for Zechariah. Just like we'll read next week of how God came to earth in an unexpected way as a baby. And so this week, I want you to write down, what are some things you were waiting for? What are some things you were hopeful for? Something I wrote down was, I'm really waiting for and hopeful for 2020 on Tuesday night. It's our first in-person gathering. And so even though I'm hopeful for it and I'm waiting for it, I'm also scared. I'm also kind of like Zechariah is like, how can I be sure this is going to be good? How can we be safe? And for many of us, we have many different things that we're waiting for, that we're hopeful for. And so I want you guys to write that down. Make a list. It could be big, it could be small, it doesn't really matter. You can just write anything. But then what I also want you to do is I want you to pray for those things. I want you to pray like, God, give me hope even when I'm waiting, even though I may face disappointments, but knowing, God, you are going to provide in unexpected ways. So take time to do that. And thank you guys for joining us this morning. We'll see you guys on Tuesday. See ya.